That's interesting. You sort of say that it's pushing sort of conservatives together. There tends to be a fairly large crossover or carryover in conservative spaces with religion, and you wrote about religion and intelligence. So what was your sort of take home with that?
Well, I wrote that in 2014, which is 11 years ago. So my views have changed rather since then. The way that I saw it then, and I think I was wrong about that, was simply that religion is logically incoherent. People who are intelligent are more interested in logic and so on. And so it makes sense that there should be a negative correlation, though it is only a weak negative correlation of -0.2 between religion and intelligence. But there's a number, that's what I wrote in the book at the time. But there's a number of, and it's true, but if you go back in history, you tend to find, but it depends when in history. So you'll note that towards the collapse of Rome or whatever, atheism is associated with being educated, essentially. But that's interesting because that's the winter of civilization, and we are now in the winter of civilization, a different time around. And it could be that that wasn't always the case. It could be that in some societies, religion is positively associated with intelligence, weakly. I don't know. In Africa, there's some evidence that certainly belief in God, as opposed to the gods, is. But that could be because it's new or newish. But the way I see it now is that intelligence is about solving problems. How do you solve problems? You have to rise above your instincts. And you probably all know of those kinds of mathematical teasers where there's the instinctive answer that everyone gives automatically, you know, and it's wrong. And there's the clever clogs will say, oh no, actually, you know, it's whatever. So solving problems and thus intelligence is about rising above your instincts. Now, it would follow that intelligent people would be less instinctive, they would be less hardwired, and they would be more environmentally plastic. And there is actually evidence for this. There's this concept in psychology of differential K, life history strategy. And the idea is that if you are in an unstable yet easy ecology, you live fast, you die young, so it's easy, food is on the trees all around you all the time, there's not many problems to solve, so there's not selection for intelligence. If you are pro-social, it might not be paid off because somebody could just be killed before they could pay you back, so there's no point being pro-social. You can survive on your own, you don't need people, right? That's what's called an R strategy. And eventually you reach the carrying capacity for the species is reached. And once that happens, then you're competing against each other. And this happens in a harsh yet stable ecology. So in the R strategy ecology, you don't invest in nurture, right? Because any child could be wiped out at any second. So you just invest in sex. And you have as much sex with as many fit people as you can, and you hope some of your genes survive. In a stable yet harsh ecology, if you do that, all your children could just die. So you have fewer partners, you have fewer offspring, and you start investing resources in that offspring. Now, in that context, how can you make sure that you survive and your offspring survive? Well, you've got to cooperate with other people. So you become more pro-social. And there's also more problems to solve. It's a more complex environment, and you're competing against other people. So you've got to be more intelligent. So you end up with this suite of traits that become interrelated. And there is some evidence that is true actually at the individual level. And so, of course, another thing that happens, by the way, is that you live fast, die young in an R ecology. You live slow, die old in a K ecology, because you've got to become used to your environment and learn about your environment. So everything slows down, okay? So childhood becomes longer. Things like this. Puberty is entered later. First sexual experience is later. Getting pregnant, later. Everything is later, right? Because you're not going to be wiped out at any minute because it's stable. It's harsh, competitive, but it's stable. Now, these things are all associated into what we call K. And it seems that even at the individual level, people who are more intelligent grow up later. They tend to go through puberty later. They learn to walk later. Everything's slowed down. So they're more environmentally sensitive. It's less built in. It's less hardware, more software. So this again explains. So we would expect, therefore, intelligent people to learn things and to be less instinctive. If you think about a cat, you can get a cat and you can bring it up anywhere and it will still do cat things. But if you get a human and you have it brought up by wolves, which has happened, then it's completely messed up, because it's highly environmentally sensitive, and it doesn't have these inbuilt instincts. It has to be taught things, because if you are in a harsh yet stable ecology, you have to be environmentally flexible, because you have to find a niche in which to survive, and so therefore you have to be open to the environment and learning about it and finding a way of surviving. So we would be lower in instinct if we were more intelligent. Now, religiousness is an instinct. It's a cognitive adaptation. It's about depending on the measure, it's about 60% genetic. It's associated with fertility. It's associated with genetic mental health. It's associated with genetic physical health. There are parts of the brain associated with it, specifically the anterior frontal cortex. It's found in all cultures, blah, 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 blah. It has all of the dimensions it hits in at times of stress as well. So it's an instinct. So you'd expect intelligent people to be lower in any instinct that you can think of. And quite good evidence that they are. And so therefore you would expect them to be overall less religious. i.e., God would be less likely to hit in. It would need to be more stressed for it to hit in, or whatever. So that's what that's one different way of looking at it. But yeah, another way of looking at it is just that, look, belief in God, it's an extension of gods, it's an extension of spirits, it's fairy tale belief.
Yeah,
it's the kind of beliefs that children have. And as you move away from that, you move to a more rationalistic way of doing things. But it's only a small correlation, though. It's only sort of -0.2. And I think that part of that is because there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on. So, for example, if society became super religious, then we know that intelligence is associated with social conformity, because intelligent people are better able to look around the world and norm map and notice what the current thing is, and then force themselves via effortful control to force themselves to believe it. And so actually, in an environment that was super religious, you might even expect intelligent people to be more religious. And I think you can see that if you look at, like, in the 17th century, the Puritans and all this, the really extremely religious people, the woke of their day, really. Those people are all middle class and educated and whatever. And then they're really upset about the kind of Catholic-y, pagan-y behavior of the lower source, and their church ales, and they're getting pissed in graveyards and all this, and midsummer and all this stuff that they overthrow. So there's all kinds of stuff going on, and that's why I think there's a weak relationship.